The day my brothers stood up at my parents' 40th anniversary dinner and announced that they were leaving everything to him, I was sitting close enough to watch my mother's face when she looked at me. She didn't look away fast enough. I had known something was coming. I didn't know it would be that night, or that it would be done that way, in front of 60 people, with champagne still in everyone's hands. But I had known, and I was ready. My brother's name is Conrad. He is 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the one my parents pointed to when they wanted to explain what success looked like. Conrad got the car at 16. I got a bus pass and a lecture about independence building character. Conrad's college tuition was paid in full. I took out loans and worked 20 hours a week at a copy center that smelled like toner and stress. Conrad moved back home after graduation rent-free while he figured things out. I figured things out in a studio apartment with a radiator that only worked when it wanted to. None of that is why I'm telling this story. I made my peace with most of it a long time ago. What I couldn't make peace with was the thing that happened when I was 11. That spring, our school had an overnight trip to a nature preserve 3 hours away. The cost was $90. I'd been saving for it for 2 months, skipping lunch snacks, doing extra chores, hoarding birthday money from our grandmother. I got to $81 and asked my parents for the remaining $9. My father said they were tight that month. 2 weeks later, Conrad needed new baseball cleats. They were $140. My parents bought them the same afternoon he asked. I didn't go on the field trip. I sat in a classroom with the 2 other kids whose parents also couldn't manage it, doing worksheets while everyone else learned about ecosystems and slept in cabins and made the kind of memories that get brought up at reunions. I never forgot that. Not the worksheets. Not the sound of the buses pulling away. Not the way my mother hugged Conrad when he came home and said nothing to me at all. That was the year I started understanding what I was in that house. I am 31 now. I have a job I worked hard for, a small house I bought myself, and a savings account that took me 6 years to build. I also have a therapist named Dr. Okafor, who once told me that the children of parents like mine often spend decades waiting for an apology that was never scheduled to arrive. I thought about that a lot over the years. My parents' 40th anniversary was in September. My mother had been planning the party for a year. The venue was a private room at an Italian restaurant in the suburb where I grew up. The kind of place with linen napkins and candles stuck in wine bottles and a prix-fixie menu that nobody fully enjoyed. There were 63 guests, extended family, neighbors, my parents' friends from church, from the neighborhood, from my father's former office. I almost didn't go. My partner, Eli, had asked me twice in the weeks leading up to it whether I was sure. He knew the history. He had been with me long enough to have watched me come home from family events quieter than I left, to have sat with me while I processed things I couldn't fully explain. He didn't push me either way. He just asked, and then he held whatever I said. I told him I needed to go. I told him I had a reason. 3 months before the anniversary, my mother called me on a Tuesday evening. She said she and my father had been thinking about the future. She used that phrase, the future, the way people use it when they mean something specific but don't want to say it directly yet. She said they were getting older. She said they wanted to make sure things were in order. Then she asked me to co-sign a home equity loan. The number was substantial, more than I want to write here. She explained that they needed some liquidity, that the house had value, that it was all very manageable. She said Conrad was already involved. She said they just needed my signature to finalize the terms. I asked her to send me the documents before I made any decisions. She paused. She said there wasn't much to look at, really, just standard paperwork. I said I understood that, and I would still like to see it before I signed anything. She sent them 3 days later. I am not a lawyer, but Eli's sister is. Her name is Fiona, and she is the kind of person who reads things slowly and says very little until she is finished. I sent her the documents the same night they arrived. She called me the following morning. The loan my mother had described as standard paperwork was secured against the full value of the house. If the payments were missed, and based on my parents' current income and existing debt load, which Fiona had quietly looked into, the lender could move against the property within a relatively short window. More importantly, as a co-signer, I would be equally liable. not secondarily, equally liable. There was something else. The property taxes on my parents' house had not been paid in full for the past 2 years. There was a lien, a real one, filed with the county. Depending on how much longer it went unresolved, the county had the legal mechanism to move toward a tax sale. The house my parents wanted to borrow against, the house they were describing as an asset, was quietly being eaten from underneath them. Fiona said, "I don't think they're trying to protect you. I think they're trying to use you." I sat with that for a long time. I did not sign the documents. I told my mother I needed more time to think. She did not push hard, which told me that Conrad had already signed his portion and they believed mine was coming. I let her believe that. The anniversary dinner was on a Saturday. Eli and I arrived on time. My mother was wearing a dress I had never seen, and my father had gotten a haircut that made him look younger than he was. The room was warm and loud and full of people who had known our family for decades. People who had watched Conrad and me grow up. People who had opinions about us that I had been aware of since I was a child. Conrad and his girlfriend were at the head table. He had the particular energy of someone who had been told something exciting and was trying not to show it, which meant he was showing it constantly. A loose, pleased quality to the way he moved through the room, the way he touched people's shoulders, the way he laughed a little too easily. I watched him and I understood what was about to happen. Dinner was served. There were toasts. From my father's brother, from a neighbor who had known my parents since before I was born, from a woman from my mother's book club who cried twice and apologized both times. The food was fine. The wine was decent. I ate carefully and said appropriate things to the people around me and waited. After the main course, Conrad stood up. He tapped his glass. The room settled. He said he wanted to say something, that he had talked with Mom and Dad about this and they were in full agreement, that it was actually their idea, and he was just the one honored to announce it. He said that our parents had decided to transfer ownership of the family home to him. He said they were signing a deed of gift. Their words, he clarified, looking proud of himself for knowing the terminology. He said the house would go to him, that it was their way of ensuring it stayed in the family, stayed cared for, that their legacy was protected. Then he looked at me. He actually looked directly at me and said, "Erin already knows this isn't going to include her." The room went very quiet, and then it went very loud. Not in the way I had feared. Not loud with discomfort or protest. Loud with approval. Actual applause. 2 of my uncles clapped. Someone said, "That's wonderful," loudly enough to carry. My mother was smiling with her whole face. My father was looking at the table. My father was looking at the table. I picked up my glass. I took one sip. I set it down. And then I said, clearly enough for our corner of the table to hear, but not so loudly that it crossed the room, "Dad, do you want to tell them or should I?" The applause had mostly faded. My father looked up. He had the expression of a man who had hoped very much that a specific moment would never arrive and had just understood that it was here. "Tell us what?" Conrad said. He was still half smiling, the way you are when you think someone is making a joke in poor taste. I said, "Maybe we should talk privately first." Conrad said there was nothing to talk about privately, that this was a family gathering and whatever I had to say I could say in front of everyone, that he didn't appreciate me trying to make a scene. So I told them, not everything. I am not a person who enjoys watching things collapse, even when the collapse is deserved. But I told them enough. I told them enough the tax lien. I said the word lien once, clearly, and watched the room shift. I told them that the property taxes had been unpaid for 26 months and that the county had a recorded interest in the house that predated any deed of gift Conrad was planning to receive. I said that a deed of gift doesn't transfer clear title when there's an encumbrance. I had learned that phrase from Fiona and I used it carefully. I said that Conrad should speak to a real estate attorney before he accepted anything, because what he was being offered was not what it appeared to be. Then I told them about the loan. I said that 3 months ago, our mother had asked me to co-sign a home equity loan secured against the full value of a house that had a lien on it. I said I had declined. I said I was glad I had. I was not angry when I said it. I had made a decision weeks earlier that I was going to say these things calmly, because calm is harder to dismiss than anger, because calm is what people remember. My voice was level. My hands were still. I had practiced this not as a performance, but as a form of self-discipline, because I knew that if I let myself feel everything in that room, I would not be able to get through it. Conrad's girlfriend had put down her fork. My mother said my name in the voice she used when she wanted me to stop. The particular emphasis that had worked on me when I was 7 and had never quite stopped working even when I knew better. It didn't work that night. My father said nothing at all. We left shortly after. Illy had been sitting beside me through all of it, one hand resting near mine on the table, not touching, just present. When we stood to go, he said goodbye to the people near us with a kind of easy, genuine warmth that I have always admired in him. He shook hands. He thanked the host. He was kind because he is kind and because he understood that my leaving did not have to look like an exit. In the car, he drove, and I looked out the window for a long time. He asked if I was okay. I said I didn't know yet. He said that was a fair answer. Conrad called me 4 days later. It was a Sunday morning, and I was making coffee, and I let it go to voicemail. He called again that evening. I listened to the voicemail. He said he needed to talk. He said things were more complicated than he'd realized. He did not say he was sorry. He said, "I think we need to get on the same page," which is what people say when they want information from you and are trying to make it sound collaborative. I did not call him back. My mother texted me twice in the following week. The first message said she was disappointed in how I had handled things. The second one, 4 days later, was different. It said she had spoken to someone at the county, and there were some issues with the property that she hadn't been fully aware of. She said she hoped we could talk. I read both messages. I thought about the field trip I didn't go on. I thought about the bus pass and the loans, and every conversation over 20 years in which I had been told, one way or another, that my needs were a secondary consideration. I thought about sitting in that classroom with those worksheets while the buses pulled away. I thought about what Dr. Okafor had said about apologies that were never scheduled to arrive. I wrote back to my mother, "I need some time. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I have not yet reached out." What I want to say and what I keep thinking about is the part that doesn't fit neatly into a story with a clean ending. My brother is not entirely the villain here. He is a person who was told his whole life that he was the important one, and he believed it, because why wouldn't he? Nobody handed him a manual that said, "This is favoritism, and it will cost your sister something real, and you should probably notice that." He just lived the life he was given and assumed it was normal. That doesn't make what he did at the dinner acceptable, but it makes him human in a way I have to acknowledge if I want to be honest. My parents are not monsters. They are people who made choices they may not have fully examined, who loved one child more visibly than the other, and probably told themselves it wasn't true, who got into financial trouble and looked for the easiest solution without thinking hard enough about what it cost. My mother still calls on my birthday. She still asks about Eli, about my house, about whether I'm sleeping enough. She loves me in the incomplete way that some parents love the child who was never quite what they expected. I think she doesn't fully know how to love me more than that. I think she might not even know that's what's happening. None of that changes what I did, or the fact that I would do it again. I was not going to co-sign a fraudulent loan. I was not going to sit quietly at a dinner table while my brother announced my irrelevance to 60 people who had known me my whole life. I was not going to let the version of this story that made me small become the official record. The house is still in my parents' names. The lien is still unresolved as far as I know. Conrad did speak to an attorney. His girlfriend told Eli this through a mutual friend, and the attorney told him roughly what I had said at the dinner table. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if we find our way back to something functional. If my parents figure out their finances. If Conrad eventually understands what his role in all of this was. I hope they figure it out. I genuinely do. But I also know that hope is not the same as waiting. And I am done waiting for things that were never going to arrive on their own. Last week, I went for a long drive on a Saturday morning, the kind of drive I take when I need to think without anyone asking me questions. I ended up in a part of a county I didn't know well, farmland mostly, and I pulled over for a while and sat with the windows down. It was the kind of morning where the air is just barely cool enough to feel like a different season is arriving. I thought about that 11-year-old girl in the classroom. The worksheets. The window she probably sat beside, watching nothing in particular. I wanted to tell her something. I wasn't sure what. Maybe just that it wasn't her fault, that the accounting in that house was always going to come out the way it did. That she was going to be okay, even though okay would take longer than it should have. I think she would have appreciated knowing that. I think that's enough. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually means to act with integrity when the people who were supposed to model it for you never quite did. Conrad didn't wake up one morning and decide to be the kind of person who announces his sister's irrelevance to 60 people over chicken piccata. He was built into that shape slowly, over years, by every small decision my parents made that told him he was the one who mattered. The baseball cleats, the free rent, the tuition. None of those things felt like cruelty to him. They just felt like love, because they were the only version of love he had seen modeled in that house. That's the part that took me the longest to understand, that people can cause real damage without ever once believing themselves to be the cause of it. But here's what I also know. Understanding why someone does something is not the same as accepting what they did. I can hold both of those things at once. I can see Conrad clearly and still have walked out of that restaurant knowing I would never let him, or my parents, put me in that position again. What I did that night wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't gather that information and sit on it for months because I wanted to humiliate anyone. I gathered it because Fiona told me the truth and I decided to actually listen, which is something I had not always done when the truth was uncomfortable. I acted because staying silent would have made me complicit in a fraud that would have hurt Conrad too, whether he knew it or not. There's a version of that night where I say nothing, sign nothing, let it all play out. And 6 months later, my brother is holding a deed to a house with a lien he didn't know about and a mortgage that's about to be called in, and I'm on the hook for a loan I never should have touched. That version exists. I chose not to live in it. Eli asked me once, early in all of this, what I was actually hoping for. Not from the dinner, but from all of it. The family, the history, the long, complicated math of growing up the way I did. I told him I didn't know exactly. I said I thought I was hoping to stop waiting for something to be different than it was. He said that sounded like the right thing to be working toward. I think about the $90 field trip more than I probably should, not because I'm still angry about it. I'm not, or at least not in the way I used to be. I think about it because it was the first moment I understood that I was going to have to build things for myself, that the scaffolding other kids had wasn't going to be there for me, and that the sooner I accepted, that the sooner I could actually start. That 11-year-old figured something out sitting at that classroom desk that took me years to fully articulate. The people who don't show up for you are also, in a strange way, teaching you that you can show up for yourself. I showed up for myself that September night, calmly, with documentation in front of 60 people who had known me my whole life. I didn't need anyone to applaud. I just needed to be able to look at myself clearly afterward, and I can. That's the only accounting that ever really mattered.